Hey, Internet. It's Paul. It's Matt, the Dork Lords. We are here talking about Good Omens, TV show on Amazon. It's only 6 episodes. I did a preview of it if you want to check that out because I'm very excited for this series. It features the works of 2 of my favorite authors, Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman. Neil Gaiman is the showrunner and adapted screenplay for this thing. So it's,
you haven't even said. Did you say in your previews? Because I didn't watch it. That it's one of your favorite books?
I did. In fact, I showed the book with the signature of the authors in it.
Wow.
There we
and
go.
when was it written?
1990.
Oh, and you read it in?
I read it in the mid-90s.
Wow. I'm really impressed with one of your favorite books.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I came at it from Terry Pratchett. Now, Terry Pratchett, unfortunately, passed away very tragically, Alzheimer's, and it was a tragic deal.
Yeah.
And so he's not around. Interestingly, Neil Gaiman they'd asked him, hey, are you going to put this into a show? And he was always like, no, I'm not going to do it without, it would only be Terry and I who had to do it together. And then Terry's not on board.
If from the grave,
Terry had written a letter to be submitted after his death that supposedly, we're taking this on faith, but supposedly Terry Pratchett said, you need to do this show. I'm basically, my last dying request is that you do this show. And so Neil Gaiman took it upon himself to pull this off.
I wonder if there's anybody in his family, though, who's like conniving enough to where's some of that stationery that he had?
That's right. Barry Pratchett was like, oh, look, Neil, you should do this. But in any case, it is now made. It's got a great cast. I've only watched the first 2 episodes so far, just so I could talk about the 2 episodes and nothing else. You have watched the whole thing.
I watched the whole thing.
You cheated.
I did.
No, that's fine. And so it's brilliant. There are certain aspects of this that I think are fantastic. I love everything about it. I don't know what about you, sir.
I liked it.
All right. Liked. In other words, you thought it was fantastic and you loved everything about it. Awesome. Great. Good. Not putting words in your mouth.
No, as I told you before, no hobbits.
There are no hobbits in it, although it does reference Pippin, who is a hobbit. Name drops.
I thought they were referencing the musical.
They were referencing.
Yeah. I was like, that's how timely with Verdon and
they do mention
Fosse Verdon coming out recently. So
they do mention that in heaven, apparently, Sound of Music is just played on a loop.
Yes, I think Bob Fosse probably wouldn't like that either.
No, that's true. Good point. My favorite part of this is where we see Michael Sheen and David Tennant playing Aziraphale the angel and Crowley the demon, and their relationship. Every time they're on screen, I'm like, yay!
Yeah.
And as looking, at my preview, I showed you the back cover of the book, which had a picture of the authors, and the authors, Neil Gaiman, was posing for that picture as Crowley the demon, and Terry Pratchett was posing for that picture as Aziraphale. And so I feel like we're kind of getting a glimpse of those 2 authors talking to each other in those moments. And it's awesome. I love Michael Sheen and David Tennant. They could actually just do the show just with them, and I'd be like, yay! It's awesome. Briefly, here's what we've got for episodes 1 and 2. We open very much almost exactly like the books. I say books. I'm so used to talking about trilogies and stuff.
Yes.
The one book that is referenced here starts exactly the same way. We're at Adam and Eve. It's the Garden of Eden. Crowley turns into the snake, tempts Eve.
Now, at that time, he was not called Crowley.
Right, I think it was called Crawley. And then they turned because he was, I guess, a creepy Crawley.
Think about it. Like, the story of the Bible is the snake has arms and legs, but once he does that terrible thing, it's like, you're going to take those away from you.
Oh, all right.
So then he's slithery, you see. So at that point, since he doesn't have arms and legs anymore, but that's what it says in the Bible, though. Like, at least that's what I've heard, anyway. Atheist.
In the Atheist Bible, it mentions that the snake had legs. All right.
Yeah.
So hence he was a lizard? Isn't that what a lizard is? A snake with legs?
A snake with legs. I guess that's what he was, but then he lost his arms and legs, and then he was, And how long are lizards?
Crowley does the tempting, And Aziraphale, as Adam and Eve are leaving the Garden of Eden, he hands them his flaming sword
Yeah,
for
because
protection.
of all the people that are might attack him or something.
Well, as you see him like taking out a lion.
Yes, that's true.
In the thing, and so there's that sense of, I like that bit where they're saying, well, maybe you did the good thing and I did the evil thing.
Right.
By handing, like, we were supposed to be, upholding to our natures, which is angel, demon. But, Crowley mentions that point of, like, what's so wrong about knowing good versus evil, like having knowledge of good and evil.
Exactly.
He doesn't see why that's such a big deal, and he feels like God
I agree with
has
him.
an overreaction by kicking them out. All that's gold. I love that stuff too. And so it makes me think that maybe like part of this, because one of the central themes we see as these two characters have a relationship through time, right? So we see them all the way up to modern day.
We do.
And
segments.
And during that's the point. You're right. No, we watch it in real time. It's
every era,
2,000 years.
We see them in the Aztec era.
It is a long 2 episodes. I'll say that.
Yeah.
I got to get through it. So we see them through time, basically working at odds with their masters, if you want to call it. And I feel like a central tenet of this thing is a central David tenet. Delicious pun. Okay, is questioning authority. I think questioning authority is maybe one of the, even down to the idea of knowing good versus evil. Like that bite of the apple is almost like, hey, I now have the power to question authority. And so I feel like maybe that is a central theme that runs through this, that our protagonists have the ability to question authority. Whereas, for instance, you see Gabriel, John Hamm, doing a great job in the role of Gabriel. Gabriel is this huge character, and he's bought into the system.
Yes.
He's not questioning anything. He's just like, right, the big war's got to come.
Right.
We're going to win it, but we're going to kill everyone's going to die. And
he is a mechanism of the system, right? So he's a leader. Yeah. So you would think that somebody who buys into it would,
He's the authority to be questioned, perhaps? Okay, I got you.
He's not God, but he's,
Right. Francis McDormand
yes.
Is playing the voiceover of God.
Yeah, and that's something that's quite interesting, actually, having seen the whole thing. We don't see any interaction at all with Frances McDormand and any other character. Spoiler, you're not going to get that. So
right, you're not going to see her like, hi, I'm God.
Not only that, but she's never going to have a conversation with anybody.
Right, and there's this whole thing.
Letting you know,
again,
that's not going to happen.
In that first scene, and I think it's brought up a few other times, I think it's Aziraphale brings up the point like that the great plan is ineffable.
Yes.
Meaning, it's too big to be discerned. It's so big that we don't know what it is, which means it's really not a plan if nobody knows what the plan is.
Well, God can know it.
Right.
So God knows the plan.
So God knows the plan, and yet doesn't communicate with anyone. So.
Yeah, this is a great story for an atheist.
Right. It's the atheist talking about the Bible.
Yeah.
Welcome back to Bible studies by atheists.
Okay. It's like ineffable. Clearly, that means there's no plan. No plan. No.
Now, I believe in the second book of the Bible, it mentions, if I quote canon, right, I think it was they were using trans warp drive. Okay, Frances McDormand, one of the moments that I liked from her in the first episode, I'm skipping around here a little bit, but there's a point where kind of one of the central conceits of the show, of the book, and of that particular episode is that the Antichrist gets switched. So there's this thing of like, the Antichrist is born, which means in 11 years the Antichrist will come of age. I guess it's an early come of age, but so be it. We got 11 years, and we got to switch them out. We're going to give them to this American diplomat, which is a great call into the Omen, basically.
Yes.
You're going to call him Damien. They were trying to do that as well. Yeah. You're like, that doesn't sound good. All right, Warlock's fine. And so this big switcheroo happens. And so you've got Crowley brings the Antichrist in a basket to this hellish nunnery. It's like a nunnery filled with Satanists.
Yes.
And so he's got the Antichrist. the American diplomat has been arranged to basically have to give birth at this place, and so the Dowlings are having their kid, and then the Youngs, the English family, have theirs. So there's 3 kids, and Antichrist gets switched with this English kid. But well, the diplomat's kid,
Yes.
Dowling Jr., whatever you want to call it, just gets carried off. And there's this bit where you hear Francis McDormand as God saying, well, you know, it would be nice to think that that baby had a nice life, lived a perfect life in harmony. I guess we'll never know. Something like that. But it's great that it's God saying, like, yeah, we'll never know what happened to this baby. Probably
We'll
didn't
never
have
know.
a horrible...
God won't know.
God won't know, as it's being taken off by Satanist nuns.
I think it might have made. You'll never know is how I might have phrased it.
Gotcha. So in any case, you've got this, obviously Adam and Eve. We got this relationship between this angel and this demon. Comes up to modern day, and it's the time to start the apocalypse, which means the Antichrist has been born. And now they're on like an 11-year clock, and then it jumps ahead again to just a couple of days before the apocalypse.
Yes.
In the meantime, they also have the angel and the demon, Aziraphale and Crowley, decide that they're going to try to teach the Antichrist. So, like, each of them is going to try to impart a bit of their own wisdom to the Antichrist.
Yes.
And Aziraphale is kind of like, should I? This seems weird that I'll be... And Crowley convinces him, well, no, see, by you teaching the ways of the Lord, you're actually thwarting us, so it's actually, you're doing the right thing. Probably it's God's plan. The ineffable plan you don't know probably includes you teaching the Antichrist. And so he's like, dresses up as a gardener. It's a very silly scene. And so they each take their turns teaching good and bad modeling behavior.
Yes.
To the wrong kid.
Yes.
Who knows how that kid's gonna grow? But meanwhile, the Antichrist kid named Adam grows up in this idyllic village, very idyllic, perhaps magically so, because he's the Antichrist. He can control stuff without knowing it. And he's got his little group of friends. They call themselves the Them, and life is great for him. And so there comes this day on the 11th birthday that this hound of hell is supposed to arrive to be a guardian to the Antichrist. And this is where Crowley and Aziraphale are like, okay, we got to somehow thwart this. We got to keep this hellhound away from this kid.
Right.
Dog never shows up because it's the wrong kid.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things they reveal at that point is that the Antichrist can make the world around him to his will. And since no one taught him that, he actually doesn't know that, so it kind of occurs without him knowing it. But the Hellhound, once he appears, will take on the shape of whatever the Antichrist wants. So he will basically okay, what do you need is the implicit message of the dog. And he sort of, I want this kind of beast to be there for me. And so once the beast arrives, since he just wants a dog, that's all.
He's like this little, a little lap dog.
And he very strangely, the Antichrist selectively expresses creativity. So in naming his dog, he's named Dog.
The dog is named Dog. The friends are all named Them. There is like a very, you're right, kind of a base.
Yeah, but at some point, and it might be in the later episode, where he's basically, though, part of his motivation is finding stuff for his friends to do. So he's the leader of his friends, so he's like keeping them using his imagination to keep them activated.
One of the things about this particular episode was, originally when it was done, it ended up being 75 minutes long, and they needed it to be 50 minutes. So they had to cut out, a third of this thing. What they ended up cutting out was a whole section where Crowley basically takes down, not to say take down the internet, but takes down cell connections, all of your phones and stuff like that. He refers to it in the episode. Oh yeah, I took down the cell, because you get millions of people all vaguely pissed off equals a giant, because his job is to basically, thwart humanity or make them think dark thoughts. And so his way, instead of like taking a few people and turning them really evil or something, he's just going to generally make everyone pissed off. So his way of doing that was taking down cell service, making it spotty. So there's a whole scene where he does that, and there's like helicopters come in, and there's like a big scene. They spent apparently a lot of money on it, and in the end they were like, snip, cut it, take it out. So yeah, they kept they had an eye towards not making it too bloated.
Now I can't remember where in the story we are episode-wise.
So in episode 2, we meet a whole bunch of folks. We've just had the Hellhound was introduced at the end of episode 1.
Okay.
And like, oh, we got the wrong guy. Where is he? Where is the Antichrist? Oops. Wow. So the second episode, they find, or at least Aziraphale ends up finding the Antichrist. But in the meantime, we see the flashback to the very important character Agnes Nutter.
Yep.
The nice and accurate prophecies of Agnes Nutter, witch.
Agnes Nutter.
She's an actual witch living in the 17th century in England.
Yes.
Bad time to be a witch.
Yes.
And so the thou shalt not commit adultery Pulsifer,
yes.
who is known for short as Adultery Pulsifer, comes and arrests her. She's like, you're late. She's aware that she's supposed to be, she's about to be killed off. They take her to burn her. She has filled her dress with gunpowder and nails. She tells them all to come close and blows everyone up along with herself, but not before having this book of prophecies that are incredibly specific.
Yes.
And all accurate. She leaves that to her family. The family then over time eventually becomes rich off of it, because in 1980 they put all their money in the Apple stock. Again, apples come up with a little Garden of Eden reference. And so now we see in modern day, they're living in Malibu in a nice, basically a mansion, and all is well there. But the newest descendant of Agnes Nutter, Anathema Device, is sent off to because the prophecy says she's got to go do this, stop the apocalypse. So she goes to the town where our Antichrist is growing up. She's attempting to find. She actually runs into the Antichrist at one point, doesn't realize it, and you get the notion it's name dropped at one point later. Crowley says, "Well, he does have an aura about him that confounds people from detecting him."
Yes.
Because otherwise, he couldn't have been more obvious in a lot of ways. It's like, I'm looking for an 11-year-old boy in this town, and so this boy's like, here's how you torture witches. Like, okay, maybe I'll investigate this kid. But she doesn't. But while riding her bike, she ends up getting hit by Crowley and Aziraphale. They pick her up, they take her, but she leaves the book of prophecies in the car, and Aziraphale gets the book of prophecies, and the prophecies are speaking literally directly to him in the moment. It's like, your cocoa's getting cold. Oh, thank you, book. So with that in mind, he takes the 666 idea. He thinks it's like a phone number. He calls the phone number. Sure enough, it's the Antichrist dad. He hears the Antichrist talking in the background about, the dog's on my leg, and he's like, sorry, right number. And he hangs up, and that's kind of how that that's plot wise where we've gotten until that moment. So we also meet Sergeant Witchfinder Shadwell, Michael McKean.
Yes.
Who I love him. Loved him ever
pretends
since
to have
Spinal Tap.
a European accent.
Right. It's a good
It's
silly
passable,
one.
yeah.
It's good for it's a Monty Python style accent. Actually, Monty Python, I thought of that when the whole burning of the witch thing was very similar in that way. How do you know she's a witch? Well, she cured me.
Yeah.
She cured me. She apparently, the idea that she jogged for health was like, horrible, it's a witch. She believes it's healthy to run. There's a Monty Python feel to that scene in general.
Yeah.
Apparently that was also a Terry Pratchett scene that he, the flashback. Neil Gaiman wanted to make sure he kept that scene in, even when they were trimming stuff off of scenes or off of episodes. So generally speaking, the idea that this thing walks a nice tightrope. On the one hand, it is a comedy.
Yes.
And so, one thing, like a comedy about the apocalypse, if you didn't take the apocalypse seriously, it could just fall into, I don't know, something that's so trivial it's not really worth watching anymore. I feel like they keep enough of an element of that the characters all still believe this is a threat, that there's still a threat in the show, that I feel like it's still got an air of seriousness to it that keeps the humor from just kind of spinning into some kind of meta joke. I don't know. Maybe I might be overreading that a little bit, but
I mean, yeah, I don't know. It's hard for me to not gauge, but I mean, I don't feel. I think the people in the show definitely take the stakes seriously.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that over the course of the show, it's very selective about the amount of violence that they show and the amount of death that they show.
We are introduced, by the way, to War, one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, who is a war correspondent who causes incites violence at a peace treaty signing. But we haven't met the others yet. But I assume there'll be more violence when it comes to those folks.
Right, yeah, that's true. People do die in that section. Yeah, but they don't do a lot of showing you the typical things that you might want in order to really respect the amount of violence. I mean, it's,
I got you. It's not like, I wouldn't call this rated R.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
So but in a comedy though, you want the stakes to not be too serious. So yeah.
Right. It's just
they don't want it. It's not like you ever feel like the makers of it think that it would be good for the Earth to die.
Right. It's like, that's another thing, is it's not so cynical. There's a cynical feel to it at times, where it's like, this whole system is stupid and crap.
Yeah.
But it's got the cynicism is, it's not over much. It doesn't go into this point of like just a bleak examination of the human condition.
Yeah, and you could actually, it's interesting. You could say they're trying to make a dichotomy between Aziraphale and Crowley, where even though you might expect them to be pure good and pure evil, they're combinations of those. But if you look at the main protagonists that are supposed to be fighting to stop the apocalypse, what's her name?
Are we talking Anathema Device?
Anathema Device and
Newton Pulsifer.
Newton Pulsifer, yeah. They're pretty just good. You don't see any bad characteristics in them, really.
I guess that's true. Yeah. She's memorized all the prophecies with this day in mind, and she's out to save the world.
Yeah.
He's kind of along for the ride, at least in the beginning. Now, by episode 2, he's still kind of like, he's just looking for a job, essentially. He's kind of just like, I want to be a computer engineer, but every time I get near a computer, it blows up.
Right. And what he's asked to do isn't evil.
Correct.
Even though it's, sort of, it's explored exactly why they're doing a little more.
I liked why one of the signs of a witch that McKeon had on his sign was that they give their cats funny names.
Yeah.
That's a witch.
Right.
But yeah, the Pulsifer thing is interesting too. So you've got, obviously, Agnes Nutter was put to death by "Thou shalt not commit adultery" Pulsifer. So they're, in some ways, their destinies seem locked, and so that by the time that her descendant Anathema meets up with Newton, their destinies are aligned.
It's interesting though. I hadn't really thought about the irony involved in the actual evil thing of burning witches at the stake. It's like, oh, they're aligned with the devil, so it's okay to do. So it's so ironic that they're playing on this sort of what we would see as a strange motivation. Like, let's find the evil of the witches, So that's the good activity that Michael McKean is engaged in, where he's looking for evil in the embodiment of women, as witches.
Right. In other words, incredibly misguided.
Yes. And therefore, you could argue that, perfect for the devil.
Right. And I don't know if this is a tie-in or not. This is probably me reading too much into this, but I did find it interesting that, so, as I mentioned, pulsifers and the nutters are aligned. So the nutter line invests in Apple stock. So computers, it ends up being their way to wealth and happiness.
I would assume that all along they were making,
Sure, on the prophecies, they were probably making some cash.
Yeah.
But it was just interesting that and then this guy wants to
really,
work on computers, but
he
blows up
by
computers.
By the time that she's young, they still have money. And, that's kind of before they couldn't have...
Well, it's just interesting that, I don't know, computers happen to be the thing that maybe gave them a bunch of cash. And on the Pulsifer side, he keeps blowing them up. I don't know what the computers necessarily represent. Knowledge, I don't know. Maybe it's more of that good,
who knows?
The garden again, perhaps. So originally this book was written in 1990, and it was taking place in present day. Obviously now it's much later, and it's trying to take place in present day. So a lot of the changes from the book are going to be because they're trying to make this modern day, a la breaking up cell towers. That wasn't a thing in the books because there wasn't really much of an issue in 1988 when they were trying to write this thing. I think it's been effectively handled to kind of push it more modern day, I'm all in. Enjoying this series so far. We'll talk about episodes 3 and 4. Any other thoughts, good sir?
No.
All right. We'll also, I haven't watched this yet, but Black Mirror has dropped.
Yeah, me neither.
So maybe we could cover.
Maybe.
It's only 3 episodes.
Yeah.
So we could cover episode 1.
Yeah.
Perhaps next week as well.
There you
go. So thank you, everybody. Come on back for some more Good Omens. Bye now.
Come on back now, you hear?